This happened during my last year of high school when I was taking a media production class. Most of the time, the class was pretty relaxed. We'd film small projects, edit videos, and sometimes stay after school to finish assignments if we needed extra time. One evening, my friend Daniel and I stayed late to finish editing a short video project that was due the next morning. Our teacher didn't really mind as long as we locked the room when we left. By the time most people had gone home, the school was already starting to feel empty. The halls were quiet, and a lot of the lights had already been turned off. If you've ever been inside a school after hours, you know it feels different. Every little sound echoes more than usual. We were working in this small editing room near the back hallway, close to an old storage room that nobody really used anymore. It was mostly filled with broken desks, stage props, and random equipment from old school plays. Around 7:45, Daniel realized he had left something in his car and said he'd run outside quickly to grab it. So I stayed in the editing room alone, going through video files on the computer while waiting for him to come back. The school network had a bunch of old folders saved on it from previous classes. Out of boredom, I started clicking through them, just looking at random stuff people had made over the years. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a folder labeled Storage Cam Live. At first I thought it was just an old recording or something, but the word live caught my attention. The weird part was that the storage room down the hallway didn't even have a working camera. At least that's what everyone always said. Still, curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked it. The screen opened to a grainy black and white video feed, and it was definitely the storage room. I recognized the shelves, the stacked chairs, and the old metal cabinets right away. The room looked empty at first. Just a still shot of dusty furniture sitting in the dark. I almost closed the window because nothing was happening. But then something moved in the back of the frame. Behind a stack of chairs, a person slowly stood up. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to see who it was. They were facing away from the camera, just standing there, not moving. At first I assumed it had to be the janitor or maybe a security guard checking the room. But then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. The door to that storage room was locked from the outside. I had walked past it earlier that night, and the lights inside the room were off. Yet somehow this person was standing there in the darkness, clearly visible on the camera. I kept watching, trying to figure out what was going on. Then the figure slowly turned its head. Not the body, just the head, tilted upward toward the camera like it knew someone was watching. Right at that moment, the video feed glitched. The screen froze for a second. When it came back, the storage room was completely empty. I was still staring at the screen when I suddenly heard something in the hallway. A slow metal scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor, and it was coming from the direction of the storage room. The sound got closer until it stopped right outside the editing room. Everything went quiet. About 30 seconds later, Daniel walked back in through the main entrance like nothing had happened. I asked him if he had been in the hallway. He said no. We packed up and left right after that. But a few weeks later, I asked the school technician about the storage room camera. He looked confused. Then he told me something I wish I had never heard. There has never been a camera in that room. Not now. Not ever. This happened about 3 years ago when I was living just outside Chicago. I used to work late shifts at a warehouse, so most nights I'd catch the last train home around 12:40 a.m. If you've ever taken late-night trains, you know the vibe. Almost empty cars, flickering lights, and that weird quiet where every sound echoes. Usually it was just me and maybe one or two other people. But one night, it was just me, or at least I thought it was. The train pulled into the station right on time. The doors slid open with that loud mechanical hiss, and I stepped inside the last train like I always did. The whole thing was empty. No passengers. No conductor walking through. Nothing. Just rows of seats and the buzzing sound of those overhead lights. I sat near the window and put my headphones in. The train started moving. About 10 minutes into the ride, we passed the third station. That's when I noticed something weird. The train stopped like normal, but nobody got on. And when the doors closed again, I could swear I heard footsteps somewhere in the car behind me. Slow footsteps, like someone walking down the aisle. I turned around. Nothing. The whole train car was still empty. I figured maybe the sound carried from another car or something. So I turned back around and tried to ignore it. But about 30 seconds later, I heard it again. Step, step, step. Getting closer. Now I'm starting to feel uneasy. So I take off my headphones and listen carefully. Silence. Just the sound of the train moving along the tracks. Then suddenly, a voice, right behind me, soft, barely louder than a whisper. It said, "Don't look back." I jumped up so fast I almost hit the ceiling. My heart was racing. I turned around. Still nobody there. No one in the seats. No one standing in the aisle. Nothing. Just an empty train car rocking back and forth. At this point, I was seriously freaking out. So I decided to move to the next car where the conductor usually sits. I grabbed my bag and started walking toward the door between the train cars. But as I passed the row of seats behind me, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the seats had fresh condensation on the window next to it, like someone had erased it. I froze, completely frozen, and slowly, the figure turned its head toward me. Even though it had no eyes, I could feel it looking directly at me. Then it spoke, in the exact same voice I heard earlier. "Why did you look back?" The train suddenly stopped. Hard. The lights flickered off for a second. And when they came back on, the seat was empty. The figure was gone. The train doors opened. We had reached my stop. I got off immediately, didn't even look back. The next morning, I looked up the train line online, and that's when I found something disturbing. 2 years earlier, a passenger had died on that exact late-night train. According to the report, the man had been sitting alone when another passenger noticed him acting strange. They said he kept turning around in his seat, looking behind him, over and over again, like something was following him. The report said the last thing witnesses heard him say before he collapsed was, "Why does it keep telling me not to look back?" The strangest thing that ever happened to me took place during my junior year of high school, back when I used to stay late for basketball practice. Our gym was on the far side of the school, and the locker rooms were connected to this long hallway that most students never used after hours. At the very end of that hallway was an old classroom that had been locked for as long as anyone could remember. Room 214. Nobody really talked about it much. It was just one of those things you passed by without thinking. The lights inside were always off, and the small window in the door was covered with old paper. One night after practice, it was just me and my friend Tyler finishing up in the locker room. The rest of the team had already left. Tyler had gone outside to wait for his ride, and I stayed back to grab my hoodie from the gym. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the school was almost completely quiet. The only sound was the humming of the fluorescent lights overhead. As I walked toward the exit, I passed room 214 like always. But something was different that night. The paper covering the door window had peeled slightly at one corner, just enough to see inside. I probably would have kept walking if it weren't for the light, because for the first time since I'd been at that school, there was a light on inside that room. Not bright, just a faint yellow glow. Curiosity got the better of me, so I stepped closer and looked through the small opening in the paper. The classroom looked normal at first. Rows of desks, whiteboard, teacher's desk at the front. But sitting in one of the desks near the back was a person, just sitting there, facing the front of the room, completely still. At first I assumed it was a teacher or a janitor taking a break. But then I noticed something weird. The door to that room had a thick metal chain wrapped around the handle, and a padlock from the outside. I remember staring at it for a second, trying to make sense of it. The chain was definitely locked, which meant whoever was inside couldn't have walked in through the door. That's when the person slowly turned their head. Not toward the door, toward the window, toward me. I pulled back immediately, my heart pounding. For a second I just stood there in the hallway, staring at the locked door. Then I leaned in again and looked through the opening. The desk where the person had been sitting was empty. The chair was pushed back, like someone had just stood up. But the classroom itself was still silent. Then something moved right in front of the window, so close to the glass that I couldn't even see its whole face. Just a pair of eyes, looking directly at me through the gap in the paper. I stepped back so fast I almost slipped, and that's when I heard the sound. From inside the room, a slow dragging noise, like a chair being pulled across the floor. Back and forth, back and forth. I didn't stick around to see anything else. I walked as fast as I could back to the gym doors and went outside where Tyler was waiting. I asked him if he had ever heard anything about room 214. He just shrugged and said it used to belong to an English teacher who quit suddenly years ago. Apparently one night the cleaning staff reported seeing someone inside the classroom after the school had closed. But when they unlocked the door to check, the room was empty. After that, the school chained the door shut, just to make sure nobody could get in or out. The next morning before first period, I walked past that hallway again. Room 214 looked exactly the same as always. Lights off, door chained, paper covering the window, like nothing had ever happened. But right in the middle of the paper covering the glass, someone had torn a small hole from the inside, just big enough to look out.
If you made it to the end, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, hit the like button. It really helps the channel. And consider subscribing for more creepy, mysterious, and thrilling stories every week. If you want to watch more horror like this, tap the video on your screen to check out my last story. See ya in the next one.